Hello, friends, and welcome to another Real Talk with Jill and Tia.
Hello. Hello.
We're so excited to have you here because today we're talking about being in the middle. In food safety and quality, it seems like a lot of our roles are kind of at this middle management level, whether it's, lower end, higher end, wherever you want to be. But one of the things in food safety and quality, whether it's a function of being in food safety, but one of the things that we see is that middle manager position gets squeezed. And I
Yes.
think we feel it more in food safety and quality as well.
Yes.
So today, I hope you joined us to talk about this middle manager squeeze that we feel and like what can we do about it? Because at the end of the day, we're all going to have something that's not going to be ideal, that's going to challenge us. But together, we want to share like what are some of the things that we've learned, but we also want to hear from you.
Yes.
So,
Absolutely.
speaking of wanting to hear from you, we love when you tell us like where are you calling in from? What's it like where you're at today? So, all right. Oh, hello. We have some friends from around the globe joining us.
Yes. New Zealand.
Yes, we're so glad you could be here today.
Yes. I'm also glad you figured out the audio.
Absolutely.
I was over here thinking, I don't know what to do about the audio if people can't hear us.
Yeah, that one I wouldn't know either. So we'd have to call our technical team. So
which
for
is just which is just us, by the way.
it's us. Yep. Well, for those of you joining us who are new to Real Talk, we are Tia and Jill, your go-to team for food safety, quality, leadership, and culture. And we love being here with you because we have lived food safety and quality and being in manufacturing for years. And we know the power of being relatable to help us move forward, to help us solve problems. And if you don't know, we are all in. We are so passionate about helping other professionals move forward and reach where you want to go. We're not just consultants. We're coaches and leaders, and we really like looking at the bigger picture that you're in to say how do we help you move forward. So
Yep.
yeah, I like to always say something special is brewing at Catalyst, um, because you all know this, right? We can all write an allergen program, and sometimes you need help doing it, and that's great. We want to help you do that if that's what you need, but we also want to help you think about how does allergen or whichever program fit with the bigger picture? How do you get more buy-in? How do you help your team live it? Because isn't that the food safety culture that we all talk about? We want people to be like, yes, allergens, I'm in it, I own it. I know, I like to nerd out a little bit, don't
I
I,
love
Tina?
it. I love the excitement. Which, to be honest, we all feel that way in food safety and quality, right? Like last week, we talked about the passion and having your passion in food safety and quality. If you didn't get a chance to see it, it's up on our YouTube channel, so please go look at that.
Mhm.
But that's
And
how we
follow us,
feel.
please.
Yes, and subscribe and follow us. But that's how you feel when there's passion there, right? Like we're like, yes, allergens, especially if things are working properly, right? And
Mhm.
people are doing the right checks, and we are making sure that we're rolling out a new allergen in our facility, right? Like we're super excited when that starts up, and we do everything right, and we have this new product on the shelf, and everyone's excited about it. That's where we get this passion and we start to nerd out the way Jill kind of talks about it.
We do because right, we've all been there when we go out and we're like, "Hey, we need to separate these products because of allergen." And people are like, "Okay." But when we explain it about how important it is and how, you know, we've all heard about how people can have these reactions and we can share a story about someone we know or someone perhaps in their family or in their circle, then all of a sudden, right, they take on that whole new meaning of, wow, I actually make a difference for somebody like somebody I know.
Absolutely.
When we
Absolutely.
see those light bulbs go on, that's the part that we know is building into that food safety culture.
Yep.
We could do the same thing for our executives because they're people too. They have people they know in their family, in their circle of friends who probably have some type of sensitivity or allergic reaction. So how do we tie into that? And that's why we geek out, because we love seeing those connections and helping put those in place so that you can really do the hard work that you do every day when you're in food safety and quality.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I know we could talk about that all day, but Tia, we showed up here to talk about something else with all everybody in our audience, right?
We did. So we're here to talk about that middle manager squeeze. And if you've been at the middle manager level, so we're talking about the quality manager of a facility, or it even could be at the director level, depending on how large your organization is. You feel like you're kind of stuck on the types of things that you're doing. You typically find yourself responding, right? Like when we think about firefighting, right? Like that sounds familiar to us. Firefighting every day. And you really want to implement programs to stop the fires. But for some reason, you can't find the time to, because
You just
people
keep
are
getting pulled back.
Exactly. You're trying to do the fires. You're trying to manage the people that are starting the fires, right? And you're trying to, take in direction from people above you.
Right. I
So
mean,
like,
aren't those the times that you've got like the phone? I always chuckle, right? You've got somebody on the phone asking them for a status update, somebody sending you a text, somebody on your
yes.
cell phone, an email coming through, and you're trying to like clean up things on the floor too.
Right, exactly. And you're trying to organize and you're trying to project manage because you have line extensions coming up, and new projects coming down. So like if you've ever felt that way in your role, let us know in the comments, because we've been there.
Welcome to the squeeze.
Right, exactly. A lot of our clients are also there too, where, they are trying to figure out how to juggle this squeeze, where it's like so much is happening. Now people are talking about food safety culture, right? Like this is also something that feels like it's new on our plate, that's continuing to squeeze us as middle managers, right? So, that's what we're talking about today.
Well, yeah, because those are the things that we hear and we've seen it and we've been in it that make us feel like I'm getting burnt out. I
Right.
feel like I don't have work-life balance.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like work is not fun anymore because I'm constantly getting squeezed.
Yes,
Like, what other
absolutely.
things do you guys feel out there? Because those are the ones that come to top of mind for me, but I'm sure there are others.
Yes, for sure. Because middle managers, we're really at the crossroads of the strategic plans. So people who might not know what food safety and quality is all about, but they're trying to tell us what to do. Or, they might know what needs to be done from a food safety and quality standpoint, but they might not know about the culture of your facility, right? Or what you all may have been working on, or what you have planned as the manager, as the leader, for the foreseeable future. So those strategic plans are kind of folding down. You're also tactical planning is kind of coming at you, right? Where you're trying to map out resources and planning your teams and making sure that they're happy and that the front lines have what they need. That's all that tactical planning we had talked about on our first episode one, where you're at the crossroads of. And then you're also getting hit with the operational planning. So that's everything that we know that's important. That's the checks on the line. That's the verification checks that you may have to do, the documentation review that you may have to do. That's really your actions day in and day out. You're really touching all three of those areas as a middle manager. And that really what caused the squeeze, right?
Yeah, because just think, if you are probably at like a VP level, you're up here working kind of in the strategic area, probably a little bit tiptoeing in the tactical, because people are asking for resources and right, we need to navigate that. But
Right.
hopefully not dropping down into operational. So
Mm-hmm.
they're not dealing with the whole spectrum on a regular basis. And even some of our like frontline team members, like our quality technicians or inspectors, often they're working operational really hard and not necessarily getting a chance to kind of navigate in tactical.
Right.
And
Exactly.
so that's why as middle managers, right, we're spanning all of those to help kind of bridge some of those gaps, help the communication chain back and forth as much as we can. And that
Absolutely. And I love this, more like crosshairs than crossroads. Absolutely. Absolutely. It feels like that sometimes, right? Because
Totally.
everyone is asking for your deliverables. They're asking for something new. And that's just not what's written down on paper, right? Like your annual KPIs, what you're tracking. We know that we get requests every day, every
Mhm.
week of something that's like, hey, can you help us out with this that maybe you didn't know about, or it's new, or something popped up in another function that they need your help with. Those things happen every day, right? So yeah, it definitely can feel more like crosshairs and crossroads for sure.
Well, and that totally depends too on kind of the state of your culture, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because right, if you're living in that culture of blame and judgment, and it may not always come across right away as blame, but right, how did this happen? That's a culture of blame.
Right.
um,
Absolutely.
versus what can we learn from this? So if we're in the culture of blame, it does feel like we're in the crosshairs, and that's
Yeah.
that's a real thing that a lot of us face on a regular basis.
Absolutely. I mean, it's things that we've faced in our careers, right?
Mhm.
Where even, I mean, I can call out probably an example in all of my roles where even if I'm within a great culture, there's sometimes that you feel like someone's like, man, we really messed up. Who do we blame? Or, man, this is a quality issue. Tia, I need you to solve this. When sometimes it feels like, well, I mean, you didn't follow the process.
Mhm.
I wasn't involved ahead of time, or sometimes the team just can't figure it out. And I know that I can help them figure it out. But people may be looking at me and like, you need to come and do this versus, hey, Tia, I would love your help in solving this issue. So I know I've been there in many different scenarios where I felt squeezed because when those things happen, right, my day job doesn't change. I have to work on this project and help you out because something went wrong, but I still have to do my day job. So you
Yeah.
feel squeezed.
Yeah, and what a great comment. Taking responsibility for decisions. And hopefully we're
Mm-hmm.
going to touch on that as we go through because of course, we talked about not only are we going to talk about kind of some of the things we feel as middle managers and what it looks like, but what are some ways that we can help maybe give some tips and guide you through handling that a little bit different or better.
Right.
So,
Absolutely. And so taking in this information, we're about to go through it on how to relieve that pressure, right? So you
mhm.
don't feel squeezed every day. You don't feel like that your role is, majority people coming at you from different directions, that you don't feel like you're in the crosshairs. And really that just makes your life and your job easier, more enjoyable, right? It leans into that passion
Mhm.
that you already have for the organization and for your role. You laugh more, you get along with your coworkers more. So those are the things that we're hoping that our tips will help you out with this week.
Absolutely. So let's get into it. The first one is awareness. And I know that doesn't always seem like the biggest tip, but here's the thing. We know the most successful leaders have a lot of self-awareness because they understand where they're at, they understand maybe their blind spots, and they understand how they are interacting with others. And when I think about awareness in this middle manager thing, Tia, I laugh because I never really considered myself a middle manager until
Right.
I was kind of like a director level. And I started feeling frustration and like just being really ticked off a lot. And, I just kind of always pushed it over to like, well, they're not following this or they caused that fire. And, it was really that blame culture and the crosshairs we just talked about, a lot of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Instead, like what a gift it would have been if in those moments back then I could have said, wow, I need to have some awareness that this frustration is trying to tell me something.
Right.
Because
Yes.
at the end of the day, when I would look around, in the conference room when we were trying to solve something, I was really the only one who was at that level of frustration. Like,
Mhm.
why are we here? Why are we fixing this again? Or like, why do we have to fix it? Why do we have to clean
Right.
up again? And I needed awareness to even just pause and say, what can I learn here?
Yeah.
Instead of letting that frustration be the thing that was driving this feeling of middle manager squeeze.
Right. I love that because, when I was at the middle manager level, I definitely had awareness that I was there and that I knew I would have to get through this role of being pulled in multiple directions. I knew I was doing, a lot of different jobs, right? That maybe in my mind should have been multiple people, but we know that we're not, we're not in, they're not going to hire two other people to help Tia out, right? So I knew that this role was going to take a lot, but when I found myself in those situations, especially situations, so I know that we've been here, right, where we have our annual training, we have our refresh training,
Mhm.
and people still mess up the processes, right? And there's this one time that I'm thinking through where it's like we've had this conversation, we talked through it, we're ready for it, and then there's still a mess up in the process, and because it's such a big issue, I need to now come in on all three shifts, and I need to retrain, I need to create more documentation, and people are, in particular the lab techs
Mhm.
were frustrated with me because I'm telling them things that they've been doing longer than I even thought about being in food safety and quality, right? So they're mad at me because I'm telling them things that they're like, Tia, we know how to do this. So, what I like to do is exactly what you said. I was aware that I was frustrated, or
Mm.
I became aware, right? That I was very frustrated at the situation. And in reality, it's no one's real fault, right? We just need to close the gaps. We need to make sure this doesn't happen again, and then we need to move on with production, right? So what the one thing I like to do is be extremely transparent. So
Mm.
if it's something where my team, for instance, in this case, lab technicians, they're frustrated, I'm frustrated. As a leader, it's really my job to rally people, right?
Mhm.
It's my job to rally them behind what we're trying to do, bring down the frustration level versus contributing to it, right? And I like to do that through transparency. So we really had, I came in on each of the shifts. Before we went down to the floor, I had some conversations with the lab techs on like, I know this is frustrating. A lot of the things we have to do is because people want us to do it, and we have to do it. There's something, this is what we can control, this is what we cannot control, right?
Yeah.
I know you know how to do your jobs. Let's just go out and do them. I'll
Mhm.
document it for everyone because that's what they want to see. Let's just go out and do it. We know, again, the blame piece where like everyone's looking at quality, even though like we didn't mess up the process, right? But having those transparent conversations, making everyone aware, right? As a leader, you being aware so you're not contributing to that squeeze, right? On other
Mhm.
people. Because if you're feeling pressure from your position, most likely your team is also feeling pressure. So how do you relieve that pressure for your team and therefore relieving some of the pressure on you?
Well, I think that's a good, I think, right, we can see it really easily when we're in a facility and we see the fire and we see everybody running
Mhm.
around or that level of energy or frustration build up. But I think it also applies when we think about, I'm going to say kind of that leading, managing up.
Yes.
Because even when I was, integrated poultry, right, farm to fork, we were still, years ago talking about, even just USDA compliance at post chill is where it used to be, and then it moved to parts for poultry.
Hmm.
Um, like, how do we do this? And, we got to a point where we were like, we're operating as separate business units, live versus production. So even the awareness of some of the frustration is coming from that strategy part. Like we need to pull these two groups together so that we can attack and be head on and more proactive and preventative with what we're doing.
Yeah.
And that's part of that awareness of the frustration of not being able to make the progress you want to see because
Mhm.
at a strategy level, things aren't coming together. So
Right.
how do you have that awareness so that as you go into those next steps, which we're going to talk about, that we can right, that we can help make some change there to help
Yeah.
relieve some of that middle manager squeeze. But I think
Yeah.
the important part is that awareness that it happens, the squeeze you feel happens in the facility, it happens in, corporate level, it can happen all around.
Absolutely. You're really talking about, like you said, the other part of it where you might be feeling frustrated with your manager, right?
Mhm.
Or the organization and how they're rolling out different strategies and initiatives. Absolutely. I love that. I love being, having that awareness and really the ability to manage up, which is
Mhm.
definitely going to be one of our topics in the future, where you can help your boss, your boss's boss, really the rest of the organization understand your perspective, right? Take out the frustration piece and really focus on your actions, what you can do, and helping them solve those things, right, and close those gaps. And it might mean, hey, you suggesting to your manager, let's set up a meeting with these two groups that need to align, right?
Mhm.
Or let me set up the meeting and lead and share some of the things that I'm feeling on my end in ways that it can make it better, right? So bringing a meeting together and again the solutions there to
Right.
help solve those gaps.
Yep. And the other part I always like to point out about awareness, because I love being able to pull people together and see what's happening. But I also think it's so powerful because even though if we asked 100 people, how self aware are you? Most people will say, well, I'm pretty self aware.
Yeah,
Come on, folks. We all know the bell curve exists, even for our levels of self awareness.
absolutely.
So, even though we know ourselves better than anybody else, in awareness, let's also consider what are we missing?
Hmm.
Because there may be times that we're frustrated, but we're completely missing something. So, how do we also find that trusted person who can help us see the things that we can't?
Absolutely.
Because for us to be able, I love this, like you have to name it to tame it.
Hmm.
Don't ask me who actually coined that phrase, but I think it's wonderful because if you don't know that you have right, if you don't know you have the problem, you can't solve the problem. If you
Right.
don't recognize what you're facing, you can't do anything to take action to change it. So,
Absolutely. Yep. I love that. And then one step farther is that person, your accountability partner, that's helping you be aware,
mhm,
they also will help you move in the right direction, even if you are aware that you are not making the right decision or being frustrated. And I've used one of my mentors where this is when we became super close, is when I shared something, a frustration of mine, and I know what people are telling me to do, right? Like I know they're telling me to, Tia, remove the frustration and have meetings and do this. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. Like I don't want to add more on my plate. I don't want to continue to feel this pressure and the squeeze, right, of my role. And this mentor really just was able to lay it out for me and say, okay, if you don't do it, this is what this means. It's like, yeah, you'll feel better in the short term, but that squeeze is going to eventually squeeze you too much.
right
And you're
back.
going to, right. And then, and then it's like, if you do it now, yeah, you don't want to do it. It's going to take a little bit of more time. But at the end of the day, when this person wins, you win.
Mhm.
So go towards the winning strategy. And I mean, that was just, I still think about his advice to this day. Because when I get frustrated and I know that I'm frustrated, sometimes I'm like, well, you know what? I'm not going to do it, or
Mm.
I'm not going to go down that path, or I want to do it this way. So this is the way. But it helps. Again, I hear his words and I'm like, okay, how do I get a win-win where the pressure is relieved off of me, and then the other person that I'm working with or the group that I'm working with also get the win that they're looking for.
Well, and T, I think that's a great setup because the next thing we had on our how to handle this squeeze, this middle manager squeeze, first was awareness, second is ownership. And I remember when I had moments of being so frustrated, man, like, why can't they just get it? Like, they should know. Like, this isn't new. Yeah, I love when you talked about, right? We've worked with people who they have been doing this work longer than I've even been working at this company.
Right.
And so sometimes, right, things would happen and I'd be like, that totally doesn't align with the picture I had in my head. That's where I had a great mentor as well who said, that's you. And
Mm,
at first I don't know if I was shocked or just surprised, but I was like, that's not me, that's them. And he's like, really? What did you do to make sure that you were all aligned? What did you do to follow up to make sure you weren't making assumptions about how that would be handled?
mhm.
Man, was that a wake up call. I
Yeah.
was like, dang. Um, and I think that's a big part because when we talk about these feelings, right? Name it to tame it.
Mhm.
How many times have we heard people be like, hey, they made me angry. That made me frustrated.
Right.
And if you can't take ownership of that feeling, like you're not going to go anywhere because you're still in the blame game and doing the crosshairs. And
Right.
I love it. Recently, somebody shared this quote with me, and I don't know the whole quote, but it was something like, too often there are many ducks out there who just want to sit and squawk. So, how can you be the eagle to soar?
Mm. I love that.
I think it totally applies here because as the middle manager, I'll be the first to say I'm guilty of sitting and squawking. I was a duck for a while. I've had moments where I'm not proud that I was the duck, trying to move around and have people swim behind me and follow. And while I was squawking, really nobody was following.
Right.
And rightly so, because I wasn't taking ownership of I was creating the frustration. I was creating the anger because I wasn't learning from the situation. I wasn't digging deeper to understand what options I had or what could I not see that needed to be seen.
Right. And you weren't looking for solutions, right? Like
No.
we're thinking about, and I love this perspective, and Jill, like you bring this perspective every day to the conversations that we have, where we talk about so much on how like people blame quality, right? And people are really saying, it's your fault, or they're like, we messed up, but you need to come and fix it because you're
Mhm.
quality. You need to come and fix it because you're food safety. So we feel that blame. So to hear, well, it is something you need to take ownership for because you're feeling frustrated about that. I think is an interesting perspective because it reminds you that you have the ability to think differently about the situation. When
Mhm.
you think about the duck versus the eagle, right? Like you have the ability to be a duck and sit there and squawk
Yeah.
and just complain about it and kind of sit where you are, or you have the ability to be an eagle and say, okay, it is what it is. What solutions do I bring to the table for this scenario? And then what solutions do I bring to the table to ensure this doesn't happen again? So
Mhm.
I'm not in the position where I even have to think about being the squawking duck, right?
Right.
Um, and I think we own that. Each of us owns that. Now, of course, we don't want to do it, right? Like we don't want to be in the situations where we have to do that. But again, in this middle manager role, you're going to feel the squeeze. So
Mhm.
a piece of that is taking that ownership and thinking, what are the solutions?
Mhm. Well, and recognizing that we're the ones who need to move that forward and the situation. And I often think about had I known that if I would just let that frustration or anger like make its movement through, because it's just an emotion, it's just energy.
Right.
There's studies that show in reality, if we can just move it through us, like 90 seconds tops is all we will experience that emotion.
Yeah.
The problem is we don't know how to process it because we're not owning it, we're not recognizing it, we're not breathing through it. So it
Yeah.
sticks with us. And I
Yeah.
think that's the other part that gets in the way sometimes as middle managers because we hang on to it because we know somebody wants to blame someone in QA, or that tends to happen.
Right.
um, and so we have this underlying level of frustration, but we need to really process that and let it go. And I know that can be hard, but I have somebody all the time who says, dropping an emotion is like dropping this pen, let it go. I know that seems totally oversimplified, but it is completely our ownership and in our control to say, you know what? I don't have to like the situation, but I also don't have to feel this frustration or this anger or this this resistance that's bubbling up inside.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I love this comment around, over time, people become overly reliant on QA to bring solutions. So yeah, they get lazy
Mhm.
about thinking about solutions. And I agree. I agree in the sense of like, sometimes people start coming to us for solutions and they don't really even think through it.
Mhm.
One thing that I would say about that is, as long as if they see you as a solution provider, that's a great thing, because you want them to come to you to think about things, to brainstorm things, to help them get to a solution, as long as you're also not doing the executional part that they should be doing, right? So
Yes.
if you can move from okay, I need you to just make this program, or I need you to do this, I need you to do this as a part of food safety and quality. If you can move them to, hey, we're thinking that we're going to come up on this problem. How would you solve it? We
Mhm.
want to be that person all the time for them. I think the piece of it is that if you feel like someone's coming to you for solutions because they don't want to think about it, then that's when you flip it on them to say, oh, you're coming with me with a problem, right? You're asking for a solution. Well, how do you think we should solve it? What do
Mhm.
you see in your day to day? I have some thoughts, but I want to hear your thoughts, because that also helps me formulate what the best path forward. Now you're getting them
Yeah.
to think about it, and you're getting them, even though they might not have wanted to when they showed up, right? They now have to think about it. And then they
Yeah.
know, if you do that every single time, they know they cannot show up to your office or to your desk with problems without thinking through possible solutions, because they know you're going to ask that question.
Yeah. And I love, Nikita, that you put our FSQA role is to support and guide. And I firmly believe that we teach people how to treat us, whether
Mm-hmm.
that's our personal lives or professional. So if people come to us and say, as food safety quality, and say, hey, solve this for us. If we do it, what's the message we just provided?
Right.
Hey, we're here to solve your problem every time. So yeah, how do we help? We used to talk with our quality managers and say, our role really is to help people help themselves. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're in a meeting or you're in a conversation and you're the one walking away with all of the to-do actions, we probably didn't help people help themselves as well as we needed to. So
Absolutely.
our goal, it's not that we don't want to do the work, but if we can't help guide and support people to have that ownership,
Mm-hmm.
then they won't. So how do we help encourage that and help people move towards that versus just going, "Ah, I know you can't fix it right anyways, we'll just do it ourselves."
Right.
Because
Exactly.
that only breeds that whole frustration cycle coming back around.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Mm.
Love that.
Yeah, and I love, Brian, your question. When someone brings a problem, what do you think we should do?
Yeah.
I love that because usually the people best suited to solve the problems are the ones that are in it, right?
Right. Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And again, it gets them out of well, I'm just going to go to QA to find the answer, right? It's
Mhm.
more like, no, we need to think about this together as a holistic team to come up with the solution.
Right. Which, once again, Tia, you lead right into the third thing about how do we help our middle manager squeeze is action. Like, we still always have to remember that we have choices to make. We might not love them all, but sometimes even you have to select. If you have all sucky choices, what's the least sucky that you can move forward with?
Right.
Action is better than staying where you are if where you are is not good.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. I love that. And really it's going to push you forward, right? It's going to relieve the pressure,
Mhm.
and not add on to the pressure, because you're the one that's doing the action, right? You're the one that's either learning to say no for your team,
Mhm.
you and your team, right? That's an action. An action is someone coming to you and saying, I want food safety and quality to do this. Or I need someone on your team to do something. And you're like, I don't have the resource for that. We have other priorities.
Mhm.
Have you talked to so and so about priorities? Because this didn't make our priority list. Having those conversations where really you're saying no, or you're saying not right now, to something. Some things
Mhm.
need to be a no, right? Like, no, we're not going to do that, right? But some things are a not right now. It's not in our priority list. These are the things that we're working on. Let's pull the group together to talk about if our priorities have changed. Those type of conversations where you're really saying no or not yet is an action that you can take.
Mm-hmm. And it's so powerful because we know as middle managers, right, we have actions or requests coming into us all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we are people pleasers, if we are like, yes, we'll do that, yes, we'll do that, yes, we'll do that. Well, once again, the awareness is I'm the one saying yes. I have to take ownership that I'm just continuing the cycle. So I need to think about the action that I want to take.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because your team is also looking for you to kind of like watch out for them and protect them. So if you keep saying
Absolutely.
yes, you're only adding to their workload more than they need too.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And indirectly that's going to cause a squeeze on you. So the more
Mhm.
that you can lighten your load or work on the things that you need to be working on, that's
Mhm.
where you start to relieve some of that pressure. You really feel the squeeze when people are bringing things to you that are not within your scope or not what you aligned on or is outside of your priority list.
And I always like to remind people that it may feel weird saying no at first. And
Mm.
so sometimes come up with some other phrase that helps. Like, you know what? I know that's really important. How about we circle back to that in a month or a week or whatever that time frame is?
Yeah,
Or Tia, I think like you said, no, not yet. We're
not
not
yet.
quite ready. We have to finish this first, but I'd love to
Right.
talk about that more.
Yes.
Because, it's always kind of, I think, looking at how we like to be approached too. Because, right, in food safety and quality, we always have requests for people. I don't know about you, but I have the awareness that my frustration level kicks in when they're like, well, I don't have time for that. And I'm thinking,
Right.
you have time for food safety?
Right. Right. So true.
So so how do we navigate that with them to help, show the partnership and help understand, like, is this, a hair on fire request, or is this, we need to have this done, in the next quarter
Right.
or whatever that is.
Right,
So,
exactly. Exactly. And sometimes we do have competing priorities, right?
mhm,
Where, something popped up and you're right. Like you need to talk with your cross-functional counterpart and they're like, I don't have time for this. This is not on our list. One thing I really remember working with a maintenance manager and we had a really great relationship and I'm like, I really need to get this done. It's something that popped up. I know we haven't talked about it. And so I gave him a realistic timeline where we kind of talked through, okay, if you could do this, how long would it take you? I'm not going to get it next week, right? But can we stretch it out over the quarter to work? And then also too, it's like, well, what's on your list that I can kind of add on my list, that I can work on through the quarter that will help you out. So I think that's a big thing around relationships, which, that's another great topic, right? To kind of
mhm.
talk with how to build those cross functional relationships. Because then it makes it easier to say no or not yet. Or, okay, I understand it's a priority. Here's how I can do it over the course of 6 months versus in the 2 weeks that you're asking for it.
Mhm.
So like that's a huge thing, and I really found in my career that relieves some of the pressure if I have those great relationships where I have a partner that's working with me, even if it's not on our priority list or whatever it happens to be that could cause us to feel squeezed.
Yeah. And speaking of action, I often think of, right, a body in motion stays in motion.
Hmm.
And believe me, I am all about there are moments where you need to pause, you need to reflect.
Yeah.
But I also think when we talk about this middle manager squeeze, what I've experienced is, right, I've had moments where I've spent more time doing like ineffective action
Mm.
than moving forward. So, for example, like I remember when we were reporting, and I don't remember the specific thing, but I remember we were doing reports and they were so straightforward and they made so much sense. So we released them. And somebody came back and was like, oh, hey, can you redo it and make it look like this or change it this way? And I was like, ticked off. Like, what? I spent more time complaining about the dang request Where had I just taken a really, really, really small action and just made the adjustment, I would have been
Right.
done. So I
Right.
think when we talk about action, right, we can all get caught in those cycles, but it is important to even think about, okay, what's one really, even if it's the tiniest of steps, can I do
Mhm.
so that I don't get stuck in the inaction?
Right.
Like, I keep
Yeah.
the motion going so that I can have the momentum to get to the next step so I can move out of this middle manager squeeze feeling that I have right now.
Mhm. Absolutely. I love that example because I was recently talking with someone and they had a request come through and it was something very similar where it's like they had this person and their counterpart in a different function needed to fill out some information on a spreadsheet.
Hmm.
And this person had already put in their information. They were just waiting for the other person to put in their information so they can send it off. And so their counterpart was like, hey, let's set up some time to discuss the spreadsheet. And this person was like, I really don't have time for this. Like that person started feeling the squeeze. And I said to them, I said, well, why don't you just tell them no? Like, you don't need to set up the time. Just putting your items. I have nothing to add. My items are already in there. Go ahead and put in your items, and then we'll discuss it at the broader meeting. And it's funny because they hadn't thought about that, and they were like, "That's a good idea." It's like that time thinking about it when really you could just be like, "Okay, I'll make the adjustment," or no, just go ahead and put your information in. We don't have to meet. We can talk about it, in 2 weeks when the whole group gets together. Then you don't
Mhm.
have an extra hour on your calendar. Again, like that person was feeling a squeeze because someone asked them to do additional work, and a lot of times that person asking to do additional work, they're not thinking about your schedule. Like they're not being malicious. They're not thinking about your schedule. They're not thinking that you feel squeezed. They're just like, oh, this will be a really good idea. Do this. Or, oh man, I had some questions. Let's set up some time. But they don't know your priorities. They don't know that this is a tough week. They don't
Yep.
know that you have things outside of work. So you are responsible for your own time, and make your actions. Um,
Mhm. Which I think is a good part too of the whole sometimes as middle managers, we get caught up in the doing versus some of the
mhm.
leading as well, which I know,
Yes.
Tia, we didn't even necessarily talk about, like, that could be we know that could be a whole show in itself.
Right.
But I think sometimes in our action, we do get caught up in like in that example or even my report, like, I already did it, I'm moving on. That's
Right.
the next thing on my to-do list needs to get done.
Yes. Yes.
And the power in that is I could have paused and said, wow, what do I need to learn that somebody's asking for this report in a different way? Because
Hmm.
I clearly wasn't aligned with understanding what they needed or
Right.
why it seemed off.
Right.
And I was so focused on that middle manager squeeze of I need to just get the next thing done that I didn't stop to even be curious enough to understand it better.
Yeah.
So
I love
sometimes I think action can even be that, right?
Yeah.
Maybe the action doesn't always have to be, I need to go do the next thing, but maybe I need to ask a question. Maybe I need to
Mm.
explore. Maybe I need to be curious.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And
Mm,
then one thing that I think about with action, when I'm in the middle manager, is looking at the priorities, right? But then also looking at what am I passionate about in this
mm,
role, and what are the opportunities that I need to kind of fill, or really gaps that I need to fill while I'm in this role. So, you might be looking at, okay, I'm feeling the pressure from all these different directions. Take it back to the bare bones. Why are you in this role? You're here to learn.
mhm,
Maybe you want to stay in this role, and want to continue to be a facility manager, until you retire, or maybe you don't even want to be in this role anymore, right? And so it's like, but you want to move up into the organization. So people are like, you need to understand how to lead a facility.
mhm,
So you have to go through this role. Those are the things that you need to learn from this role. So think about, okay, I need to get this experience to move my career in a way that I want to move it in. So think about that. And then think about your passion, right? Like,
mhm,
what do you love about it? when I was in the middle manager role, I loved developing capabilities in leadership and people development. I love that. So I made sure I had that time with my team as much as I could during the week. And those were the times that I loved, right? Like meeting with my team leader. We met once a week. I valued that time because I really took that moment to set strategy for the team, to talk about how things are going, to develop him as a leader. That was my passion. So I made sure I built those times in there because during that time, I felt relieved, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I felt like I was doing exactly what I was supposed to be doing. I was able to practice my leadership skills. I was able to learn from him. And it's that moment that, because you're doing your passion, you don't feel the squeeze at all. So make sure you build those times in your day because, that will help relieve some of the pressure that you're feeling day in and day out. And it really what keeps you happy and keeps you coming to work.
Yeah, and that is, yeah, that's kind of like the culmination of all of it. Because when we are in alignment with what makes us feel good and we're doing it, like that's the jam thing, right? That's where
Mm-hmm.
everything flows, we're in the zone, like we feel like we're adding value, there's meaning to what we're doing. That's the space. And so when we talk about feeling the squeeze, and realistically, we all have some squeeze at times. We're all going to have moments.
Absolutely.
But the more we can recognize those places, have that awareness and own
Mm-hmm.
those and take the actions, because we all want more alignment. So even if we don't love the situation, what can we learn from the situation? Because I heard somebody say once, and it stuck with me. But you can leave jobs or you can leave the situation, but you can't leave your attitude.
Yeah.
So I hear a lot of people who are like, well, in my next job, it's going to be all different. Doubt it. Like
Yeah.
whatever you've got right now going on, and your awareness and your ownership of whatever's happening, that is just going to carry over.
Absolutely.
So I think it's really important to you, like you said, like what is your passion? And you know, really connect back with, why am I in this role? Because when you can do that, it helps refocus you on the alignment and the things that really fill you up versus not.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
So we covered a lot today.
We have,
Hopefully,
it's already 45 minutes. Woo!
I know. But as Jill was saying, these things help relieve the pressure that we know that we're going to feel from our roles. It's a part of being a middle manager, right? Like you're always going to be in that crossroads. But these are some things that can relieve that pressure day in and day out. And again, really help you enjoy your job, keep your passion going, and really help you make an impact on your organization and on your teams, which is exactly what we want to do in food safety and quality, right? Help the company move forward, grow their food safety culture, and become stronger. So, that's great. So one thing that we always like to do is that we are your accountability partners, right? So if you find yourself middle managing and it's more challenging than rewarding, let's talk about it. Many of our clients are focusing on reducing burnout, improving work-life balance, and having fun at work, as pieces of their food safety and quality culture overall, right? So we want to hear what you're doing, right? We want to hear if you're feeling burnout and offer you tips throughout the year on how to reduce that burnout, how to relieve that squeeze, how to make work fun, right? But then also how to balance it with your life. We want to have those conversations, so we'll love to hear your stories. So reach out to us at hello@foodsafetycatalyst.com, because that's what we want to hear. We want to be your accountability partners.
Yeah.
And we'll also open it up for questions. So if you have any questions or if you have any additional comments, please add them to the comments, because we definitely want to have some real talk with you, which we love. This is like one of my favorite times of the week.
Absolutely. And I see we have even a suggestion for a session on ownership.
Oh, yes.
I love talking about ownership. So we will definitely add that one to the list.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I love
Awesome.
Nikita called out master action lists are great tools to provide ownership, hold people accountable, right? And provide that workload perspective. I love that. I love that
Mhm.
because I've been in and this is another topic, right, that we can get into just around workload.
Mhm.
But it's more like if I had to let people know, okay, this is what I'm doing, this is why I need a new resource, or this is how you can help me relieve that squeeze, right? Having some type of master action list of your tasks is so important because people can say, "Oh yeah, I see why this is squeezing you. I
Mhm.
understand why you're feeling that pressure. Let's relieve some by adding a resource or giving this to someone else." Or your manager could say, "That's not really a priority. Just stop doing it." You know,
Right.
so you know.
Well, and it's a great point because today we talked kind of about, I'm going to say kind of the emotional side and kind of that part of how do you handle the squeeze a little bit better. But there
Right.
are tools that we work with clients every week. Workload capacity, standard
Hmm.
work. How do we have data? Because once again, you'd never run a line at 175% capacity. So do we really want to run people that way? And the
Exactly.
only way to know that is to have standard workload capacity data to tell us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love
Mhm.
too having the confidence to discuss these issues with management or direct reports is essential. Absolutely. And that's what these calls are about, really giving you tools to build that confidence so you can go out and do and you can go out and have these conversations with your team and then use our stories, right?
Mhm.
Send us an email and say, hey, like I'm dealing with something similar. Um, can you help me walk through my issue of what I'm doing? Use our stories. That's why we share, where it's like, yes, I know someone who's gone through this and this is how they've handled it, or this is
Mhm.
how they've looked at it differently. Because that also helps with you getting the right resources, you getting the right feedback, getting the right support. Because you know what's also happening out in the industry and how other food safety and quality managers or leaders are handling it as
Mhm.
well. I
You
love
know,
that.
yeah, and use this as a way to open that conversation. Like,
Hmm.
hey, I was at a LinkedIn Live and we were talking about middle manager squeeze. You know what I found interesting about that? Look, what a great way to bring that up with your boss or maybe even
Mm.
people on your team. You know what? Like I said, I squawked. I was a duck for a while. I would totally have gone to my boss and been like, "Look, I heard something and I recognize I've been a duck squawking. Sorry. I want to be an eagle who soars." Or I go to somebody and say, "I think you're an eagle who soars. Tell me more about how you do that. Can you
Yes.
share with me some ideas?"
Yes.
So we hope you can take some of this from here and use that as your tool to open some of those conversations.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
maybe someone will be like, "That duck thing, that's crazy." Well, okay. At least you've planted a seed. Or
Exactly.
they may say, "Wow, that's interesting. Tell me more."
Right. Exactly.
Mhm.
So I love that. I love that. And that's our topic for today. So we're super excited about you all joining us every Wednesday at noon Eastern Standard Time. Come join with us. We do also post these videos on YouTube on our
Mhm.
channel, so you can always replay them, move around to the right timing that you might want to discuss with your manager, with your direct reports, or even your manager's manager, right?
Mhm.
You can always come back to these videos.
Absolutely. It's been great to have this talk today and so appreciate all of you joining us and listening in.
Have a great day.
All right. Bye,
Bye, everyone.
everyone.